Yes, that everyone open their heart for the engrafted word that will go forth from Brother Norwood.
Hey, how's everybody tonight?
He's a good example, and he always greets us with a smile.
Because I can't help it. But as always, glad to see you all, and thank you again for coming on out. And it's a little cold for most people out here. Most people were really wrapped up today at my job, and I was just out there with my sweater and my turtleneck. I think they was looking at me like I was crazy. I said, but 40-something degrees don't really bother me, so I can walk in that. That's not a big deal, you know, for a few minutes. But I believe we're going to have some fun tonight and, of course, learn the Word of God at the same time. You know the rules, of course. Your questions, your comments, suggestions are always necessary as you go through this lesson. But I got to forewarn you about something. What we're going to talk about is going to be direct in the face of TV evangelism. It's going to kill a lot of that stuff because you're going to see what the truth is of what Jesus is actually teaching about materialism and greed. So let's go ahead and go to Luke chapter number 12. As we continue to walk through that chapter. And we're going to start with, let me get to the verse here, bear with me a sec. 12, it's going to be Luke 12, verse 13 and 15. Let me get in there with you as well. Bear with me 1 second, and I'll ask for a reader. But again, it's always my joy to be with you and us to be together tonight one more time to discuss God's encouraging word for all of us. But when you have Luke 12, verse 13 and 15, somebody go ahead and read it, please.
And one from the crowd said to him, Teacher, tell my brothers to divide the inheritance with me. But he said to them, Man who made me a judge or an arbitrator over you. And he said to them, Take heed and beware of covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of the things of he possesses.
All right, so let's go ahead and let's break this down and discuss it as we do. So go back to verse 13. And one of the company said unto him, so who's the him again? Who's the him? Who's your character? Jesus, right. And in the King James verse it says master, but her translation was correct. It means teacher. And what did he want to do? The gentleman from the audience. He wanted them to get into what? The judging aspect from a civil standpoint, right? And so did Jesus play into that game, or did he refuse to make a decision in this?
He asked the question, who made me judge? In other words, he wasn't taking anything to do. That wasn't really his place. Wasn't what he was here. That wasn't, you know. So I guess he made a decision. Pretty much just told him he wasn't really getting involved. Who made me a judge?
Right.
He didn't tell a man what he wanted to hear, but he told him what he needed to hear.
I like that. He didn't tell the man what he wanted to hear, but he told him what he needed to hear. Because what was really the man's problem? He actually diagnosed his heart. What was the man's problem? Covetousness, which means what? Greed. So do you see anything that's conflicting popular preaching today? That you're going to have everything in the earth? Huh? You know, if you're right with God, you're going to have a house on the hill. You're going to have 10 cars and all that kind of stuff. What did Jesus teach this in this passage? He didn't teach nothing like that, did he? No. What he's going to do as we go through all of this chapter, he's going to try to detach us from things. He's trying to make us what? Make our treasures in heaven instead of on the earth. Okay, this is just one example of that. And of course, obviously, you know why people preach all that stuff, because why? These false churches and false denominations and things like that, they're money-making machines, right? So the more you talk about that kind of stuff, the more you're going to bring in, right? And the more you can get your hands on it. So it's a racket, it's a scam, it's a scheme, right? Because what a person really is in the church leadership is supposed to be concerned more about what? Your soul, heaven, those type of things, instead of what? Your pockets. All right, so let's go into that here. I don't want to rant and rave about that too long, but I at least want to set the tone here. And it says, and one of the company said unto him, Master, speak to my brother, that he divide the inheritance with me. And Jesus said, here's 14, and he said unto him, Man who made me a judge or a divider over you. And here's the problem. What did he say in verse 15? And he said unto them, take heed. In other words, beware, right? Pay attention, in other words, and beware of what? Covetousness. What do you think Jesus means by when he says, for a man's life consisteth not in the abundance of the things which he possesses? What is he really saying? We got a little saying for that we actually say today in our vernacular. What is he really saying? What do you think?
Don't try to keep up with the Joneses.
What's that compared to you?
Don't keep up with the Joneses.
Well, that is one of the motivators. Greed makes you jealous, right? Makes you envious. Makes you stretch yourself out in debt, right? Trying to keep up with everybody else, right? So that's one of the symptoms, one of the byproducts of being greedy, that you'll become a very envious type person, right? All right. What else? What do you think he's saying? Go ahead, brother.
Well, I think really what he's saying is, he said life doesn't really consist of abundance of things. In other words, it's not all the material things that makes a person that's really, really important for people. It shouldn't be.
Right.
Well, see, it goes against what he says in I believe it's Matthew 6. They lay not up for your 6:19. They lay not up for yourself treasure in heaven with moth and rust, dust corrupt, thieves break through and steal. But lay up your treasures here. I guess I said it wrong. Lay not up upon there, lay not up for yourself treasures on earth with moth and rust corrupt. But otherwise, you should be concerned more about spiritual things.
Right.
Building up all this material stuff really ain't gonna change. It won't change. It won't make you any closer to eternal, receiving eternal life.
Absolutely.
That's worthless, really. What he said is all is vanity.
Right.
But we should be focused on the spiritual things rather than material things.
He explained it well. And probably the easiest way to say that, he said life is not all about material stuff. To keep it plain and simple. Most people in this world, if you poll 9 times out of 10, people will say, yeah, if I just had this, I'd be happy. If I could be honest with you, if I just hit the lotto, if I just get that Georgia pot over there, I'm going to be all right, right? But what happens to a lot of those people? Some of those people still commit suicide, don't they? And they have a bank account that's more than all of us put together. And they still commit suicide, right? They still go through divorce. Their health still fails. All those type of things, right? Because they can't change life. Material things are what? They're going to wear out after a while, aren't they? And so eventually, that happiness is going to fade from whatever you get, right? Because they're not going to always bring you the same happiness. I like to use an example all the time about a car, right? When you first get a car, you're waxing it, you're shining it, you put the spit on the tires, let it get 5 years old. You can basically take a rake and get the dust off the car, after it gets about 5 years old. Because why? Material things don't really bring happiness, right? That's what Jesus is actually kind of telling you, that this is the thing that's going to bring you true happiness. And so you're going to be chasing those things in vain, as he said. Solomon told us best, in Ecclesiastes, that you're going to get everything that you want, but in the end, what is it? It's all what? Vanity. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
I was just thinking about some things that affect me just a few minutes ago, and not to go down where it came from. It's just sometimes we try to explain things to folks about a particular issue, and we use an analogy that is hypothetical.
Yes.
But what you're trying to say, they would look at what you're saying literally. It's just that the Bible speaks of literal things, but then it speaks of things objectively that's not accurate and consistently just black and white. Some things God wants us to evolve to, and in telling people how to reach that destination, you use examples down here to help them get where you want them to get. Right. But the examples you're using, they throw back at you, because it's not consistent in terms of what you want them to do. You don't explain it in literal terms exactly that support the end result. What I'm trying to say, if I tell somebody I'm gonna make you a man, and they 2 years old, and then they talk back to me and say, you need to be about teaching me how to be a baby first before I be a man. You know, but that's what I'm telling them I want to do. But I use the example, I'm gonna teach you how to be a man. Then they come back and say, well, you need to teach me how to be a child first, then be a man. Literally, they're correct. You know what I mean? So sometimes we explain things to folks, and we're not as accurate as we could be if we take a little bit more time. I hope I'm not taking up this class and I'm talking over somebody's head. This is real stuff, I'm telling you. This is difficult to deal with, folks, when you try to tell someone that's young what you're trying to get them to become at that age. You're trying to tell them, wait, I'm hoping to involve you with the elements of the issues or the things that you need to consider. And I need to teach you so you'll be prepared to be a man.
Well, and that's the point. You have to be patient when you teach. Because it's just like, you know, the Word of God is medicine. You know, you can over-medicate somebody too. You know, they can't absorb it just yet. So what do you got to do? You got to start them off on the ABCs. Then graduate to middle school. Then graduate to high school. You know, using an analogy to show how we have to progress in the Word of God. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Let's look at, really quickly here, 1 Timothy 6, verse number 10. He actually took us to Matthew chapter 6, but you know what Matthew 6:33, we talk about it every week. What does God say our spiritual compass should be set at? What do he say? What? Seek ye what? First. The what? The material stuff? No, he said what? Seek ye first the what? Kingdom of God, and then what? His righteousness. Wait a minute, there's something in between there, right? There's two things. He says what? Before material things come in the picture, he says what? Seek ye first the kingdom. In other words, be a member of the Lord's church so you're saved, right? And then what? Live right. And then what is God going to do? He's going to add all these things to you. In other words, the things that you need, right? But again, any promise, we talk about it all the time, any promise God makes has a personal responsibility first. And the first part is what? We have to respond to the Word of God, right? We got to want to be saved, and we want to what? Always work to be right in our life, in the sight of God. Then the aspect, the promise will kick in, that all these things shall be added unto us, right? All right. So let's look at 1 Timothy 6, verse 10. I want to specifically get into that for a minute. I kind of mentioned in the sermon last week, but I want to kind of really break this down for a minute. 1 Timothy 6, verse number 10. The Bible really, really condemns chasing after material things. In both, actually, the Old Testament and the New Testament. I showed you that in the Old Testament prior, but we won't have time to deal with that. Let's just deal with Timothy for a minute. Let me get there with you here. That was 1 Timothy 6, verse number 10. What we like to call the what? Preacher's handbook, right? Let's see. Because Paul was writing to the preacher to help him in his ministry and his personal life. All right, so 1 Timothy 6, verse number 10. When somebody has it, somebody go ahead and read that, please.
For the love of money is the root of all evil, which while some cover it out, they have withered from the faith and pierced themselves through with the sorrow.
All right, I want y'all to help me with this one for a minute. And I want, as Brother Stamps is kind of saying, let's life application this thing, okay? We don't want to just take in academic knowledge because that won't help us, right? Unless we're trying to apply it to our lives. So let's look at verse 10 for a minute. What does it say? For money is the root of all evil? Okay, you caught me, right? What is it? For the what? Love of money is the what? Root, meaning the cause of so much evil that's out there, right? All right, so I wanted to make the distinction between that because money has a good purpose, right? As long as we put it to the right uses, right? Right means, all those type of things. Money is a what? Good thing, right? Because money what? Gets a roof over our head, doesn't it? You know, puts food on our table and clothing on our back, all those type of things because they come down from God, right? Remember James 1:17, as we paraphrase it, every good and perfect gift cometh down from the Father of lights, in whom there is what? No variableness nor shadow of turning. So he provides money for us so that we can take care of us as we pass through this pilgrim land called earth, right? Until we come to our heavenly home with all is said and done. But when we start loving that, then what happens? then we have our evil root in our heart, don't we? And we get distracted. I like the word that he used back there, right? We start taking our eyes off of God and start looking at our bank account all the time, right? Our 401k, the stock market, all those type of things can what? They can all distract us, right? Because if we love these things, then what? They become our God. They literally become our God. And I'll show you that a little bit later on. All right, so first, let's go back to that verse real quick. Make sure we get everything out of it. For the love of money is the root of all evil, which some coveted after, meaning what? They had that evil desire, right? Greed. They have done what at that point? They're erred from the faith. What does it mean to err from the faith? They've fallen away. That's a good way of saying it, right? Because why? What did we just say? Money became their God, right? Now they don't have time for God anymore, right? They can't come to worship service no more. They can't study, right? They can't pray anymore because why? They're so consumed with making the next dollar that it has what? Literally pulled them away from God, right? Why? I'm not talking about doing what you have to do, right? We got to work so we eat, right? But some people go what? Overboard with those things, right? And then what? It pulls them away from the faith, which means it's going to pull them away from salvation, right? When all is said and done. All right, so they have erred from the faith, but I want to get somewhere. I want you to help me with this verse here tonight. I want to see what comes out of your spirit, right? And they have and pierced themselves through with what? Many sorrows. Why are they sorrowful? Now notice the word was plural. It said what? Many sorrows. So there's many different ways that materialism and chasing after riches can put sorrow in your spirit. How can it put sorrow in your spirit? Y'all help me out tonight. I can do it, but I want y'all to talk tonight. Somebody give me one way. How can that lifestyle put sorrow in your spirit? How?
Falsehood.
Go ahead.
Falsehood.
Falsehood, what do you mean by that? I think you're on to something though.
Being surrounded by people who are only with you for one reason, and you start to realize that you don't have anyone you can truly trust, and then placing your faith into things as like the subject that we're talking about goes that are temporary, and as they start to fade, you realize it's all false, it's all fake.
Mm-hmm. It's vanity, as Solomon would say. A lot of times what you have money like the prodigal son, you got friends all the time, right? But when you need, you in the pig pen, right? And there's nobody that's going to help you when all is said and done, right? And so obviously then it helped you make a lot of false friends too. And so then you're sorrowful when you find out that they're what? Not the real deal. They're phonies, right? Okay, that's one way. I think you were going to say something, sister. Was it your voice? Go ahead.
Well, just sometimes you get caught up in that fast life, and it just leads you down to a road of destruction. A lot of people get into drugs and so forth, just that kind of life, just it's no good. They can buy anything they want, and they do, and all of that is just.
Well, one of the extreme cases I've ever seen, similar to what you're talking about, like they talk about some of the guys that work in Silicon Valley, in the computer industry. And some of that maybe stockbrokers, they actually take cocaine and they do it so they can stay up all night and they can work and make more money. But what are they doing? Because of addiction, aren't they? And sitting on the other end, they're killing their own pockets because why? That addiction is going to take the same money they out there working, right? And so now what are they doing? They're causing sorrow in their own life, right? How did I get here? Why am I strung out? Why am I this? Why am I that? So forth and so on. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
The other thing I was thinking about also with the falsehood is they begin to idolize themselves because of their money and materialistic things that they have. And so they place themselves above where they need to be. And then you start getting the ones that, like she led into with the drug addictions, that they're invincible and they're untouchable and things of that nature. And so, the idolatry part of that alone is a problem. And then they start doing reckless things and, lose their lives.
Yeah, it starts going to the head, huh? Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Go ahead.
Sometimes you could become a lonely person too, because you're working so much and you're constantly chasing the dollar that you don't have time for your family. If you're married or you have kids or you don't have time for anybody because you're constantly working, trying to chase, money.
Well, and that's one of the things that came directly to my mind. You lose your family. You literally do. A lot